Hi, I'm a former higher ed CMO, and I have a confession to make. I think that something has got to give in a major way with regard to higher education and the way that we use data in marketing. And I also have another confession, and that is that I am a giant Joshua Dodson fangirl. So I am so thrilled that Joshua Dodson is the official first person to come on the show twice, and he is sharing a ton of insights not only into how to use data to analyze your marketing, but also into tools that you can be using that didn't exist 3 years ago. Some tools that didn't even exist a year ago that can make turning data into insights possible for anyone, regardless of whether you have a computer science degree or, like me, a journalism degree or, anything in between. So I really, really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Joshua Dodson is a strategic marketing leader who knows higher education inside and out. He has nearly 20 years of experience and has a unique perspective that comes from working both inside institutions and as a consultant helping universities transform their marketing approach. His career has spanned roles as an instructor, a university AVP of digital marketing, a web analytics strategist, and a former vice president of marketing and innovation at Vision Point, where he led integrated marketing and web teams. He's known for consistently anticipating market trends, building consensus, and delivering measurable ROI on every project. Beyond consulting, Joshua is a passionate educator and a sought-after speaker who's delivered keynotes at national higher education marketing conferences and taught over 500 students as a faculty member with higher ed experts. He continues sharing his expertise through the Dodson Academy, where he teaches professional development classes in marketing mix modeling, SEO, web analytics, and strategic marketing planning. As CEO and consultant at Honed Consulting, Joshua works across multiple industries but specializes in higher education and nonprofit marketing, helping organizations strengthen their performance marketing capabilities. I hope you enjoy our conversation. You're listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, the podcast where marketing minds in higher ed come to pull back the curtain, spill a little tea, and talk honestly about what it takes to market in this industry. I'm Jaime Hunt, the founder of Solve Higher Ed, author of Heart Over Hype, and a former campus CMO who spent more than 2 decades navigating the weird, wonderful world of higher education marketing. This show is for the strategists, the storytellers, the change agents, and anyone who has ever tried to get Faculty Senate on board with a rebrand. Here we get candid about the challenges and share the ideas that are shaping the future of our field. Sound like your kind of conversation? Then let's get into it. I am absolutely delighted to be here with you, Joshua. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your second time on the show, the only guest that's been back.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm thrilled to be back. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
One of the things I love about Joshua is that we can nerd out about data, which is something I think gets neglected a little bit in higher education. You'll have heard that in my confession, but I feel like we don't do as much with data as we could. So I wanted to bring him back to the show to talk about data again. And I'm just really excited about this conversation. And I want to start with a question that's like probably on everybody's mind. And that's the idea of like, what is good data? Like there is so much data, but how would you define what good data is in the context of higher ed marketing? And what makes it trustworthy and useful for people to be able to make decisions with?
Yeah, it's an incredibly important question because a lot of people get confused and think that good data means perfect data. And good data does not mean perfect data. In fact, perfect data pretty much doesn't exist. And so the challenge that a lot of people face where they're like, my data is not perfect. I don't really know what I can do with this. I would say that shouldn't be a concern. What should be a concern really is being consistent and collecting those kind of the basics consistently. Because if you're able to connect your web analytics, your GA4, your Google Analytics, or your GTM, you have those kind of basic tracking elements in place. you need to start there. And as long as you're consistent, you're not missing the tracking on large sections of your website and things like that. The consistency is always more important than having it all perfect. The other piece I would say that's extremely important is making sure that you're connecting that data, that it can be connected directly to your outcome. And so for us in higher ed, that's typically enrollments, it could be donations, maybe event registrations, things like that. But there should be a direct line, even if it may not be obvious at first, being able to draw a direct line between your activities and the impact of those activities. I think that's when the data becomes good and actionable, when you're actually able to do something with it.
Yeah. I was just talking to a friend of mine. I'm not going to say what school this person's at because he said he couldn't come on my show because his boss didn't want to share the secrets. But
Oh,
they have figured out how to use their data to figure out the ROI of their spend and then make a case for additional resources. Like for every dollar we spend here, we get $7 of tuition revenue. So if we up this in this particular category, and then they also look more responsible by saying, this particular program, we have spent a ton of time and effort to market this program. There's nothing, we've tried everything. This program may not be viable, and ultimately led to a program shutting down because there was no way to bring in the students. And I'm just curious about your take on, is that kind of what you're talking about, being able to make those conversations, make those cases?
absolutely. That's a perfect example. I think a lot of times when we're talking about what are the results of this or that, we look for the bright spot. We look for that positive aspect. And, because everyone wants to look good and we want it to look like our efforts are paying off. But at the same time, it can be just as valuable, sometimes more valuable, to be able to have that data and connect those dots to say, this program, we thought it was going to be great, but it's not. It for whatever reason, our market isn't responding like we thought it would. Sometimes that can be, just you need to take a step back, reevaluate your strategy, and just change some small things. But sometimes, like you said, it could be an indicator that this program really isn't right. And that's a hard decision, a hard call to make. And you definitely don't want to do that lightly. But if the data is there and you're able to see it, absolutely. I would say that's a perfect example of someone who has good data that they're able to act on and make some strong decisions with.
Yeah. Well, and when I think about how you can go to your board or your CFO or your cabinet or whatever and actually be honest about what's not working, I feel like that earns you credibility. If you can say, hey, we are going to shift our spend because we are doing the analysis and using the data to see what's working and what's not. And I feel like that builds trust because they feel like, well, we're not going to just give you another $1 million. You're just going to spend it willy nilly. You're going to spend it intelligently.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. I mean, when a leader can admit that they were wrong, that they made a mistake, even in my view, and I think many people view this way, it increases their credibility, as you're saying,
Yeah.
because you know that they're not just going to come in always trying to sound like everything's perfect or we're doing great. Just add more money. They're being realistic. They're being responsible with that budget, and that's ultimately more important than pretending like everything is dancing in the tulips.
Right. All coming up roses.
Right.
I'm really curious in your work over the years, what have you seen are some of the most common mistakes that institutions make when interpreting or acting on their marketing data? Like, what do you see the most often?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges around that is misunderstanding correlation and causation.
Mhm.
Um, sometimes it looks like something is happening. You might have started a new campaign in a channel, and suddenly all of your applications shoot up, and you have to be careful to make sure that you're analyzing it in the correct lens, that this one thing, it might have caused it, but there might have been other variables, there might have been things in the environment, and looking at the whole picture is really important. And so understanding that difference between causation and correlation. Actually, an old boss of mine years ago had a great example that I'll share quickly. There's a correlation between death by shark and ice cream sales, right?
Yeah.
There might be a correlation there. You can see he pointed out he had some data that he was showing. That correlation had nothing to do with one another. It was entirely due because, well, it's summertime, and
Right.
the weather gets warm, people eat ice cream, weather gets warm, the sharks stir up, near beaches sometimes. And so that's a simple kind of extreme example, but it makes sense when you start to think about, does this cause that? And so sometimes part of that is also recognizing that you might have blind spots,
Mm.
and what are those blind spots? Are they being accounted for? And even if you don't know all of the information around those blind spots, being able to identify those potential areas where we know that this has some kind of impact. We don't know what it is exactly, but being aware that the data you have might not be representative of the full picture either. And so sometimes it just takes that a little bit of patience and kind of working slowly but strategically and consistently to build the right data to be able to answer some of those questions and correct some of those common mistakes for sure. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that that has happened extensively. I mean, I know there have been cases where it's like, oh, the only thing we changed was we put this ad in the marketplace and that zip code. Now there's more applications coming from there, but we may not be aware that we also had an admissions counselor who went to that high school and spent 2 days, drumming up applications or something like that. Like, and that's part of where I think that having that fulsome relationship between admissions and marketing is really important to understand, like all the factors. It's not just the digital advertising, it's not just the view books or the billboards or the whatever. It's all those other little touches. And I'm really curious, how do you suss out where your blind spots are?
Yeah. Well, I think it really does start with having those conversations internally. I really like the example that actually you mentioned in your book, where you shift the mindset from me to we,
Mm.
and thinking about it in terms of other departments working together. And because, for example, you might be able to include some of that data from enrollment management or admissions, like events, things like that. For example, when I'm building out predictive models, I want data from the admissions team and the marketing team. I want to be able to look at everything, and including things that you might not expect, like how many events take place on campus, and when are they taking place, and those kinds of high school visits that you mentioned, that there could be those and that, by having that connection across departments, it can really open the doors in terms of the type of data that you're able to see, and you're able to fill in a lot of those gaps. Not all of them, but a lot more than you could have if you were treating it in a siloed way and just looking at purely just the marketing data.
Well, a lot of my colleagues, when I was a CMO, and to be honest with you, a lot of the phone calls I get now on the consulting side, and you probably do too, I hear from CMOs saying, the admissions people don't share data with me. And to me, that's like saying to your admissions people or your marketing people, I'm sending you out into the world with a bag over your head.
Yeah.
Please help me with my funnel. Like, how are they supposed to even know or make pivots or understand, like, oh wow, apps are way down in the 50-mile radius of campus, like maybe let's do an agile campaign to try to bolster that population. If you want to have, I also hear from admissions people saying they want their marketing team to be more proactive in supporting these sorts of challenges that they're having mid-cycle or whatever. But you have to be working together to even understand that the challenge is there
Right.
and work together on developing some solutions to them.
Absolutely. And I've heard a lot of those kinds of claims too, that that this department or that department doesn't share data. And I think one of the things that can be really helpful in moving that forward, in moving the data sharing and kind of the collaboration forward is defining it a little bit more clearly. Like,
Mm.
what data do I need from them? Because they might not be sharing it because we might not be asking in the right way. We might not be
Mm.
asking in the language that they're using. And so sometimes refining the request a little bit and being specific can change the dynamic. For example, you might ask how many applications are coming in during this time period, and they're like, well, that's not a report that we necessarily run as it, like in the way that you're asking for it. So you could ask for it in a slightly different way and say, give me a data export from Slate that has all of the user, or rather, all of the student IDs, and that can be anonymized. You don't actually have to have the IDs, but they have the IDs and then the dates that those people inquired, applied, and enrolled. And that data set, it might not look like the one you asked for, but you can easily turn it into what you were asking for. You can count those days of applications on certain dates. And the reason for the ID is to deduplicate, to make sure that you're not accidentally counting multiple times. So sometimes it's just changing the request a little bit and trying to learn to speak the language of the other department, because that can really go a long way.
I love that. Love the idea of like shaping it so that you're speaking the same language. And honestly, if you've had a fraught relationship and you're not getting what you need, the solution is not to just say, well, then fine, I'm taking my ball and going home. Like, we're all trying to serve the institution. We're all trying to keep the institution solvent, I hope.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not, you don't belong there. And just continue to try to bridge. Like, can we sit down and talk about what you have, what I might need, how I might want to use it? I feel like even just explaining, like, hey, if you got me this, that would help me do this for you,
Right.
versus like, just give me your data. I deserve your data. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ability to translate that, because if you're asking it in the right way and they're able to give it to you, you can then use that and line it up with some of the other marketing efforts you're doing. And even if you don't have let's say a robust, predictive model or something like that, you're still able to use that and kind of point to it and say, well, here's at least a chart that shows what we're doing, and it's comparing it to these activities that we want to take place. We're all working towards the same goal, and now we're able to all see it in the same dashboard, and being able to see it in a dashboard that both teams understand. So just being able to, I think, speak the same language, or even if not perfectly, to be able to try to translate that request and kind of figure out, like, how can we work together to make sure that we're looking in the same direction, because that's what we ultimately want, is to be able, we want all of us to look in the same direction, even if we're doing different roles.
So there's a lot of folks that listen to this podcast, I know, who don't have a data analyst on their team. How should they or any other sort of resource constrained team start with trying to use data more effectively without maybe necessarily hiring a full-blown data scientist to have on the team?
That's a common challenge for sure. And I would say that the first step is to get back to the basics, to be consistent with the basics. Things like I mentioned before with like Google Analytics, GA4, Google Tag Manager, having some of those basic things in place, feeling good about that. Once you have a better understanding about what's in place, what information is available from that, I think you're able to do a lot more from that point, because you have consistent data, and even if you've not turned it into some great model, you can be confident with that data. You can look at it, regularly, hopefully. And then another piece of it that I would say is the upskilling part. There are tools and platforms and various things that are available right now that I would say really level the playing field in a big way. There are things, techniques, types of analyses that really used to be very specific to those with specialized skill sets and the ability to do really complicated things. Well, AI and technology has really changed that in a big way and made it to where I won't say that it's a complete democratization yet. It's moving towards it. And you have to still know what questions to even ask if you're using AI, but it at least gets you a lot closer there to understanding. Here's a report that came from a platform I'm looking at, maybe even let's say Google Ads and Facebook Ads and all of these different ad platforms where you're running ads. You're taking all of that and then you're uploading that to AI, like a Chat GPT or a Claude or a Grok or any of those, and asking it to pull out some information around how a specific campaign is performing or some areas where it's not performing well. It's able to do a pretty good job of looking at that and providing some recommendations. And kind of that's at the basic level, but even going a step further, doing some of the trainings on those tools to even get a little bit deeper, it's really I am shocked almost every day when I'm checking out some new aspect of a tool, a new feature, something that came out, and I'm like, this wasn't possible 2 years ago, like
Right.
it's remarkable what we can do. And so I think that there's a lot of that, and I would definitely emphasize the upskilling and also the collaboration with other teams, like your IT team. Maybe they have some skills. You're not a Python developer, but maybe they have one, and you guys can work together to be able to say, well, I know this aspect, you know that aspect. Let's bridge this and make a really robust model that tells us a little bit more and gets us a little bit deeper.
Right now, I want to tell listeners, and I give you credit for this all the time whenever I speak about AI. You are the person that introduced me to ChatGPT. It had been out for like a month. Josh introduced me to it, and I was like mind blown. It was after we recorded our last episode, so we haven't talked about AI yet, really at all on this show. But it blew my mind. But I want to like plus 100 the idea of using those tools to help you. Like that, you can also do things with unstructured data that took forever before. Like I got one of my clients sent me their freshman survey, and it was this massive survey. And we were trying to get to the heart of something having to do with the website and feedback around the website. And that was all in just unstructured comments, right? It was qualitative data, not quantitative data. And we were able to put that into ChatGPT. I did ChatGPT and Copilot to get insights out of that based on that before you would have had to like hand code probably all of that unstructured data. It's so amazing what you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. It speeds things up in remarkable ways. It really does. And one thing, I'll give a quick, like little quick tool recommendation. And that is, there's a tool called Cursor, Cursor, and it's built for developers. It really is built for people who program and things like that. But it doesn't have to be used in that way, because what it really is a tool that connects your AI to your computer and allows you. It will do some things for you. You can ask it to research and search for things, but it doesn't just stop there. Like, ChatGPT and the others can do that. It will take it and it will do multiple steps and save files and create the code that you need to be able to analyze these other things. I mean, it does all of it right there in this one tool. And you have access to ChatGPT, Claude, all of these different AI models through this tool. And I use all of them. I have a bunch of subscriptions, but I would say that Cursor right now is my top tool when I'm using AI, not just for coding. I use it for that too, but also for things like creating content, building out outlines, and then expanding those outlines out into content that I can work with and edit. So that's my little side note tip: is try out Cursor. It can completely change your life.
So we are recording this episode about a month before it's going to come out. Listeners, it's July 10th, 2025. If you're listening to this by the time this episode comes out, ping me because you are the second person to mention Cursor to me this week.
Oh,
And I am absolutely going to dig into this because both of the people who've mentioned this to me are people that I like really love nerding out with on about data and AI. So I'm excited to try this out. And I think like I hear people all the time say like, oh man, you have to have the paid version of ChatGPT to do custom GPTs, or you have to have the paid version to do this and that of whatever tools. Like, guys, this can be life-changing technology. The $20 a month that I spend on ChatGPT probably buys me 20 hours of time a week. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but a ton. And I'm able to do things I literally I could not have evaluated 3,000 qualitative survey responses in any way, shape, or form without ChatGPT.
right.
Like, make the investment, even if I don't understand when like supervisors won't allow the department to pay for it. I get budgets are tight, but we're talking about like this is a tool that can be so changing for you. But I also don't get like $20 a month if you have to cancel Netflix,
Right.
like spend it on this. This will make you a better marketer, a better whatever. Buy the tool. I mean, how do you? I mean, you're like me. I bet you have way too many dollars tied up.
Way too many. Sometimes they're toys and sometimes they're tools, and I would say that you're exactly right. These are investments. These are not. You might be able to play around with them like a toy, but really these are not full replacements for a team, but it can be a mechanism that you can really speed up production of whatever it is you're working on, whether it's code or a strategy of some kind or a media plan. You can use it for aspects of all of it. And I mean, it really is like having another team member, at least one more team member, that $20. And so not a full replacement for a human, but it's pretty nice to have that assistant.
Yeah. No, it's so helpful. Buy it, everybody. Buy it. Build some custom GPTs. I mean, I am not a data scientist. I love data. I'm a nerd about data. I'm not a data scientist in any way, shape, or form. And I was able to build a predictive analytics model to be able to gauge for one of my clients, hey, let's look at the students who've been successful for the last 5 years in this graduate program. And then how can you look at your applicants and kind of predict based on their attributes and the attributes of the students who've been successful, how likely they are to be successful in the program. I'm not a data scientist, but I was able to build something like that in Copilot. Don't sit here and think, I don't have a computer science degree. You can figure this out. Just put the effort in.
Yeah. I think that it's more important to have a spirit of exploration and willingness to make mistakes and kind of try things out and learning. You're learning from those mistakes, of course, but that's much more important to have that attitude rather than to have data science skills going into it or to have all kinds of technical expertise, because you don't need it anymore for many things. And so I mean it's really awesome how it's come so far so quickly.
Southeast Missouri State University needed to launch more targeted campaigns faster, yet they were bogged down by manual campaign builds, slow approvals, and vendor overload. With Element 451, they eliminated 5 vendor tools and gained marketing superpowers in one platform. They saw a 13% increase in applications, processed applications within 2 days, and achieved 30 to 35% email open rates. The impact was personalized, automated campaigns running at scale without the drag. Ready to turn your next campaign around in hours, not weeks? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents. Yeah. There's stuff that's like, I've always wished I knew how to do it that I'm now able to do. Like, I've always been super into technology because my dad, that was his thing, like super early adopter. But there are so many things where I don't have the technical skills or the technical knowledge to do this that now I'm able to do with AI. It's truly life-saving. I can't thank you enough for being the person that was like, hey, Jamie, can I show you a thing? And I'm like, this is awesome. Thank you so much for that, Josh.
Oh, of course. My pleasure. I hope more
Uh,
people use it.
right. I think it's coming around. Which makes me happy. So, Joshua, I want to pivot a little bit. What is one thing you wish every higher ed marketer would start doing tomorrow with regard to data? And what's one thing that you're like, just stop doing that?
Well, I think that the first thing that I wish everyone would do related to data is just to do a simple evaluation of what you have available. Because if they could start there, it's much easier to know where you're going. Defining the terms is always the first step when you're trying to understand a new concept, whenever you're trying to explore something. And similarly, you need to define what data you have available. You need to understand what's there, what's not there, what's being used, what's not being used. And that's okay. This isn't to judge something. This isn't to, criticize, for not already being, proficient. That's not the point. The point is starting there so that you can learn, that you can grow, and you can develop. And kind of on the flip side of that, one thing I would absolutely encourage everyone to stop doing is to create reports for the sake of reporting. So often we create these meaningless reports, a lot of vanity metrics, a lot of things that are like, well, just how many people viewed this, and that can be helpful if in certain contexts, but really it's not connecting it to what you're really trying to achieve. Your goal is not just more people reading it. Usually, the goal is action, and so I think it's important to sort of to have that perspective where you're using it more like a GPS to tell you where you're going and kind of or what the direction of the road is, so that you have a better idea about the surroundings, about your market, your environment, and using it that way, as opposed to trying to get some sort of insight out of data that is really just information about views and clicks. It's not as useful. It can be. You can make it useful, but by default, it very often isn't. And so stop reporting for the sake of reporting and start to really evaluate, see what's there, and build from the ground. So that way you can treat that data more like a navigational system as opposed to just kind of like a report of this is what happened.
There are so many reports that we create in higher ed for our boards and for our leadership that are completely meaningless. Even things like, oh, we've grown our followers on Instagram by 17%. Toward what end, though?
Right.
We're not reporting the to what end piece of that. And even I worked for someone that was obsessed with the media reports. How much media coverage have we gotten? And I was always trying to contextualize that with, we may have gotten this much coverage, but we were trying to recruit students from this particular zip code in this particular state or this particular region of this particular state, and we got this much media coverage in that area. So can we contextualize it to say like, yeah, sure, we've got some hits in Connecticut. Who cares? Why does that matter? Well, we're going after this particular students who go to this particular public or private school in that area. And that's why we want that coverage there. But so much of what we report is we had 1.3 million impressions.
Right.
Cool.
And the one thing that I think you could do and sort of how you could take that example and sort of turn it on its head a little bit is that if you let's say the same exact scenario, you're targeting a certain geographic area, and you want something that's really useful, with a little bit of planning and preparation, you could create something called a geolift analysis, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're looking at a geographic area and you're seeing, did this provide a lift? And you're applying statistics to it. Like there are packages, actually. Meta, the company that owns Facebook, has a package. I believe it's called GeoLift, and you can use that analysis using a lot of the same data, like that follower data and things like that. You might be able to bring that into the analysis but you're applying a statistical approach and you're planning it in such a way to where you're able to say this has a causal effect, not just a correlation, but there's a causation element here. And so I say that to share, like, you can know for sure it is possible. You can run the type of analysis that tells you definitively this caused that. It just needs a little bit of preparation and planning to be able to do it right. And it's not necessarily so difficult. It's just feels intimidating because it's not something we do all the time.
Yeah. I feel like we need to have like a whole show where I just say, and how would I report this? You tell me how we do that. Because there's a lot of things that I think we report and we share that if we could give greater context, we might get more resources.
Right. Absolutely.
Like to say, pitching these stories in this geographic area, we can attribute, X number of additional students to that. Imagine if we had one more person pitching, the value of what they cost per year versus the number of students that we get in from that. There's just so much opportunity, I think, for us to share data in a way that gets us the opportunity to get additional resources to do our jobs better and help our institutions better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Josh is probably not going to plug this, so I'm going to plug this for you in this question. So what tools, platforms, or courses would you recommend for marketers trying to up-level their data skills? And I really do want you to talk about the Dodson Academy in your answer here.
Okay, sure. So I would say that there are quite a few tools to try, and kind of depending on someone's level of comfort with technical elements, things like GA4 and Google Tag Manager, those are some basics. One really helpful tool that's kind of along those lines that I recommend everyone use that I don't think enough folks are using is Microsoft Clarity.
Mm.
It's another free tool, and it gives you that heat map view of what's going on with your website and just shows you a different perspective of it. And then another one is Looker Studio, which used to be Google Data Studio, but Looker Studio is another free option where you can bring in data from multiple sources into one dashboard, and that can be really helpful, especially because, as we talked about earlier, you're wanting to bring in some of that enrollment data alongside of your marketing data. And so those are a few. I think, though, when I really think about the tools that get me excited the most, they're going to be things like the marketing mix modeling tools. So this is an area that has been a big focus of mine for a couple years now. And there are several tools on the market that have really simplified how to do all of this, because marketing mix modeling was something that used to be specific to just Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies that could spend literally millions of dollars a year on this. I mean, that it used to be extremely costly, and it's something that I had my first hands-on experience with it when I was at SNHU. I worked on the data team, which was separate from the kind of standard program marketing team, by the way. It was kind of separated, but the data team, we were able to utilize marketing mix modeling in addition to some of the other predictive models that we had. And it opened my eyes to some possibilities. And then fast forward a few years and looking at what's available now, free on the market, free for anyone to download and use. Some of my favorite tools that I'll recommend, there's one called Robin, Robyn, and that's was created by Meta, the Facebook company. So Robin is one of them that I strongly recommend. Another marketing mix modeling tool uses a slightly different approach that comes from Google, is called Meridian. So they have theirs called Meridian. And then the third one that's very popular in the marketing mix modeling space, not that it's a huge space, but it's one called PyMC. And it's a Python based approach. So of those three, Robin, Meridian, and PyMC, all of them, I believe, have Python versions. Some of them have R versions. And so depending on the language you know. But here's the trick. You don't actually have to know Python perfectly, because you have ChatGPT that can help you formulate your code. You just have to kind of be familiar with the concepts and the direction that it's going. And so you go to the page, we'll say Robin or Meridian, you download the code, you start working with it, you kind of just upload it to ChatGPT and ask it questions. Here's my data set, here's the code, help me put my data into the format that's needed for this analysis. It will do that for you very easily, very quickly. And so that's a big one that I would recommend, is exploring some of those free open source tools. And then what I'll mention, you thankfully, I appreciate the shout out for Dodson Academy. So Dodson Academy is dodsonacademy.com. You can go there, a website, and we have several courses that we're teaching. It's instructor led. So I'm the instructor for most of them. We'll go through, I have a course right now in marketing mix modeling. It's an 8-week course that over that entire period of 8 weeks, we build a full marketing mix model from scratch. Wow. And so the participants come in and, from nothing, starting from nowhere. You don't have to have deep technical knowledge. We go over the concepts, what data you need, how to clean that data, how to how to put it into the model, and then letting the model run, and then how to use the results and do some storytelling. So that way you're not just boring your executive team with something that they don't understand. We're putting it into action and putting it into a presentable format to where it makes sense. You can do something with it. And so I have marketing mix modeling for higher ed. That's the higher ed specific one. I also have an advanced marketing mix modeling that goes into other industries. If that's something we're curious, for example, if you want to go deeper into nonprofit or e-commerce or whatever it might be. I also have some courses on marketing strategy and marketing analysis, things like that. So there's several courses that I offer, and my goal is just to help people kind of go from wherever they are to learn the skills that they need to really be successful in implementing it at their own institution. Because something I've learned as a consultant is that I can create a model and work with the school, give them a model. But if it's just a one and done thing, it very likely is not going to succeed in the way that it would if there's a lot of internal buy-in and they're regularly making those updates with new, fresh data as they've made decisions, they've been in market, they've made changes. And so teaching them internally how to do it, they usually have the skills to, as a starting point, at least enough to get into the class and feel somewhat comfortable being able to move forward and get more comfortable every week. So it's really exciting to see students go through. And I would say for me, the biggest highlight is when I have students come back to me and say, this changed the way I think about marketing.
I love that.
And so that's always exciting, a nice bit of feedback whenever I hear that.
I love that. I feel like, this is just stuff that we need to be thinking about more. When I started working in higher education in 2004, it was like we were faxing press releases. Like I was still mailing things to editors. It was so different. And we were using zip drives or whatever to get files to our printers, and having all these like FTP issues to get files to people, all of this stuff. We have evolved as a profession. Marketing as a profession outside of just higher ed has evolved so dramatically in that time. But higher ed is just like 10 to 15 years behind. I was talking to someone yesterday who was talking about, that's kind of the problem with higher ed websites is we're like 10 to 15 years behind, but our audience is on websites that are 2025 all day. Right. We're not keeping up. We're not keeping up on data. And I think in taking a little bit of resources and investing it in your people to upskill, investing it in these AI tools that we've been talking about, just kind of push yourself forward from a institutional perspective. I think it will help you. We're in like a serious enrollment challenge right now in higher education. This will help you push your institution through that. but it also gives you skills that you can, if you do need to go onto the market as an employer or as an employee, or you want to go into consulting or whatever, having these skills is just going to give you the edge over the person that's like still kind of operating like it's 2021 and not operating with the knowledge and the insight that these tools give us.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. These are some of these skills are highly in demand, especially in certain industries that e-commerce, for example, is always way ahead in a lot of ways because they understand what it can do for them. They understand that this can impact their ROI. And doing these approaches, you not only get a better insight into that ROI, it can actually show you what the incrementality is. So it can tell you if you spend an extra dollar here, are you going to get that much more, or is it going to start diminishing those returns? And when we start to talk about things like diminishing returns, a lot of people like their eyes roll over and okay, we're getting into a boring area now. But it's a fact. I mean, these are aspects of these marketing channels that we use. And so being able to model that and understand what's really happening, how long we can expect a TV ad to stay fresh in someone's mind compared to a Facebook ad. And by the way, the TV and billboard is almost always more effective than you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I remember that. So I had hired Josh when I was at my previous institution before I went into consulting. And I remember you shared that, which is fascinating. Because it's, notoriously known as hard to measure, but you figured out how to measure, and that was such great insight.
Absolutely. It's really exciting when you can uncover those insights like that.
Yeah. So my last question for you, Josh, is looking 3 to 5 years ahead, how do you think data will reshape how universities approach their marketing and enrollment strategy?
Yeah. So I would say, as I think 3 to 5 years out, there are some things that let me take a step back for a second and say it's tricky because as someone who spends a lot of time focusing on innovation and thinking of ways that you can better utilize data and things like that, I see a lot of potential. I see a ton of excitement potentially there. But I also know higher ed really well. And despite the fact that there's almost always potential to try new things, I also know that, as you mentioned before, it can be several years behind before we actually get there. So if higher ed really leverages the potential, they really take it seriously and kind of make some of the changes that they can make and treat it like it should be, I think things like real-time personalization and scale, with AI. If AI is not a part of your website in 5 years, you're doing something wrong.
Very wrong.
So, I mean, it's not only is it possible, at every month it seems like it's getting cheaper, and so you're able to use less expensive APIs and all of those things to make your website, make your landing pages, make your experience that much better. You should be able to treat your website as if it is a virtual admissions counselor, helping that person along the way. And so there's a big possibility that could be the case. I hope it is. I think it requires a little bit of change from mindset change on behalf of higher ed leadership. But I think one of the things that they will have no choice but to do is to be much more nimble. They're going to have to learn how to adapt faster. Market changes, new platforms coming out, all the time. There's something else that's happening, and so there needs to be faster changes. And finally, I'll say one thing that has been a need, I believe, for a long time, and I think more are starting to realize it. I've been excited to see some institutions taking that step forward and putting enrollment management and marketing under the same branch, under the same, if not department, at least closely working together. They don't have to report to the same person necessarily, but if they did, it would be better. Almost in almost all situations that I've seen it happen, it's increased enrollment. And so I think that will be something that they'll have less of a choice if they want to still stay relevant.
I love these insights. My kingdom for every university to hire a futurist, like someone who's looking 3 to 5 years down the road and saying, this is what we need to be doing today to be ready for that. And like really having someone when their feet hit the ground in the morning, they're thinking about that future, the future with technology, the future with where learning is going, the future with what students want and need, the future of AI, all of that. Like every campus needs like somebody who's thinking like that. And if you're in a marketing office or in an enrollment office, is there a position that you can create on your team that has that future looking lens? And can you make the case for that and show like this will help us differentiate because we're going to be able to do that real-time personalization that's going to be setting us apart, or fill in the blank. Better serve the audience. I think better serving the audience will lead to better enrollments, better retention, better persistence. But, making the case for that. I literally could talk to Josh all day. And I think I'm so excited. We're going to be working together on a project in the next couple of months. I'm really excited about that. Where can people find you if they want to chat with you or maybe learn more about your courses or your work with Honed?
Sure. So LinkedIn is a great place to start. Connecting with me on LinkedIn, Joshua Dodson. We talked about Dodson Academy earlier. That's just dodsonacademy.com. I have all of my courses and information there. And if it's something where you don't have the ability to teach team members, to upskill them directly, and you want to bring someone in and help you actually do the work, that's where my Honed consulting company comes in, and the website for that is just honed.agency. And so, yeah, those are the best places to reach me.
I hope people reach out because I think this is just too important. This is such an important conversation. Listeners, as always, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt, JaimeHunt. You can also find me on my website, solvehighered.com, and my book website is heartoverhypebook.com. And I am always interested in chatting. I don't want anybody to think that they're wasting my time or, whatever. I'm always interested in chatting with you on those platforms or via email or whatever. So please feel free to reach out. And until then, let's go bust some silos. Thanks for listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and contact drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.